Hey everybody, welcome. Pastor Corey here with Court Street Christian Church, and welcome to another in our series called Learning Along the Way. This sermon series was inspired by some time that I spent on pastoral retreat recently, and a lot of the things that I learned along the way on that trip, we're getting to savor some of those nuggets and just enjoy them today and during this series. So here's the deal. While I was out and about, I took this 2.5-week-long road trip by myself. I lived out of a van, stayed at campgrounds, and it was just an absolutely delightful experience. There was a couple times along the way, too, when life along the road got a little bit frustrating. One of those happened to be in the middle of an epic day of travel. It was one of the days I just had to eat up a lot of road because I was trying to get over to the East Coast to visit my spiritual director. And I was just plowing through freeways and highways, just going through some beautiful country. And I got to Colorado, to a place called Canyon City. And when I was there, I stopped to go grab a couple of quick supplies. And it was probably about 4:30 in the afternoon. And when I came out, I get in the van, and the dash lights up like crazy, and it won't start the rig. And I'm like, oh boy, that starts this whole process of troubleshooting. I go buy a battery for the rig, I put it in, it's not that, but I'm able to get the rig started, and I limp the rig over to a little auto parts store that was there. And I go in, and I'm just desperate. And the guys that were working there were super gracious and super helpful to me. They came out, they tested my vehicle with their diagnostic thing, and they confirmed what I suspected at that point, which was alternator problem. And so the alternator needed to be replaced, and because at that point it was about 7 p.m., there was no shops that were open. I was just going to need to do it right there with these two mitts in that parking lot, and a thunderstorm was brewing to top it all off. But these guys were super gracious. They're like, hey, we loan people tools. You got this. And I just started tearing into this Chevy cargo van with the 4.8-liter V8 in it. And fortunately, whoever designed that engine, they put the alternator right on the top, sort of towards the back. And so I was able to reach in there, and the easy part was getting that alternator off. Now, the terrible part that took the most time, covered me in grease, and caused me to say some things that I had to repent for later, was which part of the process of changing the alternator. If you know what it is, tell the person that you're with, or just say it out loud. It was the serpentine belt. It was terrible. It's this belt that goes around the alternator and around the air conditioning unit and around all of this stuff in order to power the vehicle. And once I took that alternator off, it lost its tension and it just came undone for everything. And so I was doing these like epic, weird yoga poses while covered in grease, trying to get this thing put back into place. And finally, at 9:15, just as they had closed down the store and they let me run in to wash my hands and clean up, they were super gracious to just be kind to me about this. I was done. And I was putting all my stuff back in my rig, and all of a sudden somebody comes walking across the parking lot towards me, and it's a gentleman. And he's saying some things to me in pretty broken English. I was having trouble understanding him. It turned out he was actually from Haiti, and he was traveling with some family, and he brought one of his grandchildren over, and they were able to help us translate and help us communicate. Well, it turns out he saw me working on my rig, and they were working on their rig, and I went over, and they just needed help, and so I ended up working with them for a while, and then I'm like, wait, I got to go get you guys something, and I ran over to another store that was open and got them something it was actually some jack stands. They were balancing this trailer with this boat on it to change the axle there in the parking lot, and it was balanced literally on duct tape and bubble gum. I mean, it was just this precarious thing, and I was like, I don't want to see somebody get crushed. So I'm helping these guys. I'm sharing my light, some of my tools with them. They're super appreciative. We're working, and they almost get the thing done, and then they realize some of the bolts from the old axle don't quite fit the new one, and they were going to have to leave it there overnight and get to it when the stores opened in the morning. And I remember the gentleman who I met, he comes up to me at the end, and the jack stands are holding this thing up, and he's like, hey, tells me, I want to pay you for these. And I just had this moment where I was like, hey, you can pay me for those, but I would rather you just take them as a gift. And as you guys are traveling, you're probably going to meet somebody else that has need. Just pass on the kindness to someone else. And he just was super appreciative and super grateful, and we parted ways. And the next day, I actually saw them pass me on the freeway with the boat and everything back in good order behind the vehicle. But I'll tell you what, when that whole ordeal was over, I hadn't eaten since early in the morning. I now had missed my next destination where I was supposed to be, where I had a reservation to stay that night. Everything was closed. Everything was booked. It's 11:30 p.m. in this small town in Colorado, and I'm standing there. I'm hungry. I'm homeless. I don't know what's going to happen. And you know what, though? The truth was, in that moment, my heart felt very full. And you know, the reason that it did, I believe, in hindsight, was because I got to connect with a special part of myself that is the image of God in each of us. That when we connect with this part of who God made us to be, it actually fills us up and makes us feel more alive. And it's the word that I want to talk about today, of what I've learned along the way, is the value and the power of service. We're going to talk about service today and what that means to serve, to be a servant. And to start off, we're going to look at the greatest example that we ever could. This is a story from the life of Jesus where he exemplified this in a special way. And so this is Jesus' Last Supper, literally his Last Supper, the Last Supper. The painting, the whole bit is about these moments that are taking place between Jesus and his disciples on the eve before he's to be arrested, incarcerated, and then crucified, publicly executed. It's going to be just terrible. And so he's in these final tender moments. And here's what happens. It says that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Come back to that in a bit. And that he had come from God and was returning to God. He knows that the crucial moment is about to happen where he's going to no longer be on the planet in a physical sense. So he gets up from the meal. They've been enjoying this big ceremonial meal called the Passover celebration. He gets up from the meal. He takes off his outer clothing and he wraps a towel around his waist. And after that, he pours water into a basin and he begins to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. So you can picture Jesus, and he's down on his knees, and he's working to wash these feet. This is a very dirty job, by the way, in any society, but especially in Middle Eastern society at the time, where they often traveled dusty roads where animals traveled, and they wore sandals, and so feet got kind of nasty. So this was a job that was despised. People probably didn't even want to wash their own feet, let alone have to wash somebody else's. But here's Jesus down, washing the feet, drying them with the towel that's right there with him. And it's this very intimate, beautiful moment of service. Let's see how the story goes on. When he'd finished washing their feet, he puts on his clothes and he returns to his place at the table. So he says, "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Jesus is saying, you know who I am. You know I am the Lord. I am the one that's at the top of the food chain, and I've just put myself in this meal at the very bottom, willing to touch the dirtiest parts of your life and clean them up. I'm a servant, and if you're going to really be following me, you're invited to be a servant as well. Well, there's a lot of ways to think about service. It's a broad concept, and I want to zoom in on three things that were really inspiring to me from this story. The first one is this, is that serving, just a practical kind of definition here, serving is meeting a practical need in an incarnational and loving way. Incarnational, that's kind of a big word. I'll talk about that in a second, but I just want you to consider this and consider what you just experienced from Jesus. Serving's meeting this practical need in this incarnational and loving way. You know, we might modify this statement a little bit in our everyday practice. Sometimes we meet practical needs in a way that actually feels loving to us. You know, we kind of love others the way we're wired to be or loved. And so this is something a little bit different, though, this definition. Sometimes we meet practical needs in an incarnational way that actually isn't loving, but it gets over into this territory of enabling someone. And so this framework for looking at it is a little bit different than those ways that sometimes we get lost in serving. You know, this word incarnational, it's the big word to describe what God did when Jesus left heaven and he became incarnate. He inhabited a human body on the planet and he entered our world. He entered our mess, so to speak, and he experienced what it's like to really, truly be one of us. And one of the beautiful things is we get to experience that gift of incarnation when we connect with another person's reality. I've been married 20 years this August, on August 25th, and over the years, Allison and I have participated in different marriage seminars, and we've taken different, things, get to know each other. One of the most telling that we just revisited this in the last year, we'd taken it early on in our marriage, but was the 5 love languages test. And one of the things that we realized is our primary love language for each of us, the one that's highest rated, is actually the lowest rated for the other person. And so for me, my highest rated love language is acts of service. And my lowest one is gifts. And for Allison, it's exactly the opposite. Her highest rated one is gifts, and her lowest one is acts of service. And when you're in a relationship like this and you're really wanting to love one another well, we often, though, slip into that place of just loving from the perspective of how we want to be loved. And there was a lot of years where I would approach Allison and I would be thinking, I'm about to do the best thing in the world for her. I'm going to serve her. I'm going to take care of the dishes. I'm going to help her in the kitchen or whatever was going on at the time. I'm going to get her oil changed in her car and all this kind of thing. And money was tight, especially young in marriage. And so I was like, oh, gifts, whatever. We'll get to those at Christmas and her birthday or something like this. But the truth is approaching her with my love language, it actually sometimes kind of activated some stuff in her where she was like, oh, I just kind of really wanted to do these by myself, or I felt bad. I wanted you to go relax, and now you're demanding to help me with this, and I just want you to be able to sit down so I can do that. And vice versa, too. Sometimes Allison would get me these great gifts, and I'm pretty particular about gifts. And I would be like, oh, that's nice, but now it's generated, I have to go do an errand, and I appreciate it, but it doesn't fit, and so I've got to go do all this. I'd rather have you come help me clean the garage. So that's a great picture of what incarnation is. It says, I don't just love in the way that feels good to me, I actually step into your reality. And now I've conditioned my Amazon cart where it gives me recommendations sometimes for Allison, and I'll grab different things, and just oftentimes I have 2 or 3 gifts, scurried away at my house somewhere where I can just pull one out randomly and give it to her. And it speaks her language, it incarnates her reality. Let's go back to this definition one more time. I really want you to get this, and it's so beautiful from Jesus' life. Serving is meeting a practical need in an incarnational and loving way. Jesus didn't have to do any of that. He had all power, he had all authority, he could just have a total God complex. God could have a God complex. It's funny because he doesn't. He's the God that does this kind of thing. He's not standing far off just saying, deal with it and do it my way and shut up. My will be done and yours whatever, This is the picture of God that we have. So, as I was considering this week, and I was considering how sometimes this beautiful definition can kind of go wrong in our lives, and when it really goes right, and it feels like it did for me in Canyon City, where even though I was exhausted, I was filled up, is I thought of a childhood image of being on a teeter-totter. And here's a little gif of a teeter-totter, if you've forgotten what these are like. Look at these fun guys. Doesn't that just look delightful? They're just having a great old time. And I so wanted this image of teeter-totter to stick for you. I almost thought about constructing like a teeter-totter on stage and maybe having me and Pastor Josh be on it like this and just be like going and being like, wee, it's so much fun. And maybe we put on like clown makeup and say something creepy like, sorry, I don't know what comes over me sometimes. But anyway, we saved the money. We got the gift instead. But here's what I want you to understand. There's this wonderful relationship that takes place between knowledge about God and service to others. And when they work together, it's kind of like having fun on a teeter-totter. One is going up and the other is going down, and then the other is going up because of the other person. And they get into this relationship where the teeter-totter is going, and it's beautiful, and we're learning things about God, which is changing our perspective of others. And so we're living out that knowledge in service to others. And as we're serving others, we grow in our knowledge of God, and we see God in new ways. And you can see how the teeter-totter just goes really beautifully. It's a very special thing. Now, we all know, too, if you remember being on the teeter-totter, there was a few terrible things that could happen, right? Well, there's probably three. One is nobody would go with you, which was terrible. Another was you'd get some turkey on there that decided they wanted to jump really hard and try and bang you against the ground. Or the other was when it was just out of balance. And it was really hard to make the teeter-totter work because things were out of balance. And so I want to look at this from the perspective of when we're too service heavy, when we're doing, we're human doings instead of human beings. And maybe we lose some of that connection to the knowledge of God and growing in that at the same time that we're serving. You know, when we're in that place and we're serving, you know, it always sounds really good and it sounds really holy when we're doing things. But when we're doing those things in a way that actually diminishes us, wears us out, or even when we're doing them in order to actually serve others, to serve ourselves, that's when things get really out of balance. And instead of growing in service and experiencing more of God, service becomes like this never-ending burden, and we become overburdened. And oftentimes what I see in Christian circles, and I experienced this in my own development along the way, there was a long time where I just wanted to be a servant and I didn't want to be served. I thought that's how it should be. It should just be me serving, me giving, because God gave so much, so I should just always be giving. And I really wasn't allowing God or others to serve me as well. And so I want you to write this down. This is another inspiring thought about serving, is to serve, I have to let myself be served also. If we rewind the clock 48 hours from when Jesus is sitting having this Passover meal and he's washing his disciples' feet, just 2 days before that, there's another foot washing that's taking place. And this time it's Jesus. It's Jesus being served by a woman who comes in and just expresses all of this love and all of this sorrow over Jesus. And she washes his feet with her tears and her hair. And she opens this very expensive bottle of perfume and places it on his feet. And Jesus acknowledges what's taken place to the people there and talks about the beauty of it and how profound it is. And Jesus is being served and loved by this woman. And 2 days later, he's serving and loving his disciples in another way. So, let's look at what happens with the teeter-totter when we go the other direction, okay? When we go the other direction. This is where our knowledge becomes too heavy, and we're not actually living it out through service. You know, I experienced this in my own life when I went to Bible college. I spent 4 years at Bible college and really enjoyed my time there. It was a beautiful experience. And but the best thing that I experienced at Bible college was not just the knowledge that I gained, but was actually the connection between how that knowledge could be lived out and serve in the real world. And there was things that our college had us do. We had to volunteer off campus. In my ministry track program that I was a part of, I had to become an intern, and I was actually an intern at this at this church, and what I was doing was I was practicing what was being preached to me at college. I was making the connection of getting the teeter-totter going. But despite those things, there was no way around it. College is often a knowledge-heavy time. And that's why it's so valuable to have internships, to have practicums, to have residencies, or to be a journeyman after you acquire a bunch of knowledge to actually learn how to apply it and to serve, make that knowledge serve in the real world. And so for me, I left Bible college, and honestly, I was way head knowledge heavy. And what it actually did was it caused me to not be able to see how to really serve. I was serving out of my head instead of out of my heart. I was serving sometimes in judgmental ways, trying to make it fit into all this, overwhelming amount of knowledge that I had just had, rather than just doing the incarnational thing, the loving thing, and meeting someone in a very practical way. I was trying to push them along to this knowledge of God rather than walk along with them through it. There's a great scripture about this that just sums it up beautifully. I love how bold the Bible is about some of this stuff, even in talking about its own effect on people and how it can be. This is Paul, someone who had enormous knowledge and who had a wealth of training, and yet he'd drop in these zingers as he was teaching people sometimes to drive them back to the place of making sure that their knowledge was actually valuable and wasn't a detriment. And he just said it this way. He said, knowledge puffs up, but it's love that builds up. What I think Paul was giving an insight to there is he was giving an insight to the teeter-totter. That knowledge puffs up when we're knowledge heavy, but in love, when we're serving, the teeter-totter goes, and it's a beautiful thing. So I want you to write this thought. This is my third and final inspiring thought here on serving to consider this week is knowledge without service is often a net loss. This might be a tough one for some of you to digest. You may be feeling some resistance, but I just want you to sit with it, sit with the scripture, and just consider this, that knowledge without service, it actually often is a net loss. In the last year and a half, we've experienced a lot of loss. And we've also experienced some fresh lenses to view serving others in a beautiful way. I'll never forget when my neighborhood was rallying together early in the pandemic, and neighbors were coming over. You need any water? You need any toilet paper? You need any hand sanitizer? We were just all looking out for each other, and we were sharing resources, and we didn't know how long it was going to be. We kind of got through one crisis and one world, event and trauma at a time. But overall, too, in the last year and a half, there's been a lot of time, more time to absorb knowledge and information, really, than often there has been to actually serve and to live it out. And I feel like that's true for some of us as Christians, too. Some of us, we really gorged ourselves on all of this teaching, and we really got into these great studies, or we were looking into the end times and studying all this stuff. And my question for you is, has that knowledge actually made you better at serving God's kids? If it hasn't, if it's just become knowledge and you got more knowledge and you got more information and more information, you may be in the place that knowledge is actually becoming a loss. So it's time to repent. It's time to come to God and say, Lord, show me where I can actually live this stuff out. And I want to tell you about a guy from our church. His name is Bob Miller. Bob Miller, we did his memorial service here at the church back in 2018. In fact, it was this month. It was August of 2018. And Bob had lived this pretty amazing life. He was passionate about motorcycles. In fact, he introduced me to motorcycles and got me into it for the first time. Also, you'll see a picture here of Bob and his beloved wife, Marlene. Just a very dear, just sweet, salt of the earth people. And Bob was oftentimes, he was working with his hands. He was a handyman. This next picture here shows him with with an award he received. This was actually from his service to the fire department. But he was this guy that had this great presence about him, this kindness, and he had this amazing heart for service, whether it was serving as a volunteer firefighter or he was serving so much in this church. In fact, Bob developed a nickname around here. He was called Bob the Builder. And all of our child care center kids, whenever they would see Bob come in, they would start chanting as they were on their way between their classes and just giving out these little whoops, "Bob the Builder, Bob the Builder." And Bob would smile and he might give them a little high five or say hi to the kids as he was on his way to be the church volunteer handyman. He would install electrical outlets. He would redo some plumbing. A toilet wouldn't work. Nobody could figure it out. Bob would come in, and at the end of the day, everything would be fine again. And Bob just had this amazing heart for service, and he had this beautiful relationship that we're talking about. He was involved in church, involved in worship, involved in the knowledge stuff and in studies, and then he was living that out through service, and it was just an absolutely inspiring thing to see. Bob's one of those people that when I think about him, I just saw this heart from Jesus for serving others in these practical ways lived out by Bob. And the amazing thing was when I would visit Bob towards the end of his life as he was in an assisted care facility, and I'd sit with him, and oftentimes when I would go in and talk with him, he would talk about those years after he retired when he was able to be Bob the Builder, the church handyman. And you know what he would say? He would say, "Those were the best years of my life." That is the beauty of a life of service. When our knowledge about God leads us to this service of love for others. And I want to go full circle. I want to go back to this story about Jesus again. This is happening in the middle of this ceremonial meal. And Jesus is the guest of honor. These folks, they know him as Lord. They experience him as the best human being, the most intelligent, the wisest, the most powerful human being. In fact, right here it says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. And so in the middle of this meal, as the sacred guest at this sacred meal, he gets up in the middle of the thing, he gets up. And what does he do? He becomes the lowest of servants. Not out of obligation, he does it out of love. And then he looks at these folks that are following him, that are looking up to him, and he says, "Do this like I've done it." One of the disciples in this encounter, his name's Peter. You can read the story too. I hope you will. Spend a little time in John 13. It's quite compelling. You can also compare it with that story of the woman washing Jesus' feet. That's found in Mark chapter 14. And look at the beauty of these two moments. But the disciple Peter, in the midst of this story, he actually gets offended that Jesus would touch this dirty part of himself, his feet. And he says, "It's not you that's going to wash my feet. I'm going to wash your feet." And Jesus corrects him and helps him understand. He's like, no. You have to let me serve you in this way. This is the way that I'm leading people, and this is the way of God. And my question for you that I want you to consider today, I've got two of them. The first one is this: where do I need Christ to serve or wash me? You see, there's always these areas in our lives, isn't there? There are the areas of where we're feeling dirty, or where we're feeling like we don't want this part of us to be seen. And the amazing thing about who God actually is he is the God that sees those areas, is not intimidated by them, doesn't condemn us in them, but he wants to humbly step in and us allow him to wash those areas, to serve us. And if you can't let God serve you in that way, you'll always be stuck. The teeter-totter will always be out of balance. And I just want to say this, before we get to the second and final question today, I just want to really ask you that again. In fact, bring me back to it, would you, Elena, that first question there? Where do you need Christ to serve and to wash you? I want you to consider that question, and I'm going to say a prayer over you, and then I'll have one final couple of thoughts, and we'll send us on our way into our week. So let's bow our hearts in a word of prayer. Gracious Heavenly Father, there's areas in my life, Lord, where I'm trying so hard to clean myself up. I'm trying so hard to make up for some of the negative things in my life by doing positive things. And right now, Lord, I pray that you would allow us to meet you in this sacred space where we can let you touch those areas. We can lean into you to clean those areas up. We can lean into you to serve us, to really experience your incarnational love in a practical way in our hearts. I just pray, God, for everyone in the sound of my voice. Maybe there's some that are still stuck in the idea that you're a God that's far off, that you're a God that wants to condemn, that's just looking at us going, not good enough, not good enough. And maybe today, Lord, some of that religious fog started to clear to see the relational Jesus saying, can I meet you? Can I wash your feet? Lord, I say yes to that. I hope everyone that's hearing my voice right now says yes to that. And I thank you in Jesus' good name. Amen. Well, this message, it's got a dispensation in really all aspects of your life. Service isn't just for Sunday morning at church. It's really for all of your personal life. It's for your neighborhood life. It's for people in your own household life. Maybe you've never thought about looking at the people and being like, how can I serve these people? How can I meet practical needs in this incarnational, loving way for them? Maybe you need to think of it in your work life, your school life. It also has an application in this church as well. One of the things that's been super exciting as we've reopened in-person services is now we're starting to dream together about how we can serve and how we can get our hands back into the community even more. And so here's my last question for you today is this: who are you compelled to serve? When you think about the people that you know, when you think about the situations that you're in, the things you come across, what's tugging on your heart, where do you want to serve? Maybe you realize this year you consumed a whole bunch of knowledge, a whole bunch of maybe anxious information, or who knows what it was, and you're like, man, I really feel the heaviness of that knowledge. I need to get out there and work my spiritual muscles, and I need to serve. Maybe you're going to do that through the church. In fact, as we're relaunching a lot of our programs around here, we have a huge need for volunteers, for people to serve. We've got needs in our children's ministry department. We have ways you can serve coffee to people and just make their life better. It's awesome. People to just greet and just be that welcoming presence of God right at the door. Our youth ministry is always looking for support, and our worship team, we're always eager to welcome in new band members and experience their talents. Our media team, maybe you're the behind-the-scenes person. Guess what? We've got opportunities there. There's our prayer team. There's so many other things. This is really just a small list but a few of them. Our weekday receptionist is another one. Here's what I want you to do. If you already know where you want to serve or how you want to contribute, just contact us. You see this. It's all over the place. Our website, it's always in these services. Just reach out to us. Or even if you don't know where to serve, but you're like, I want to do something, but I don't feel like I fit here. I don't know if I have the right skills for this. We love it when people reach out to us and go, I've got a heart to serve, but I just don't know where. We love making those connections. Well, there's one more big service need that we have, and the clock is ticking down to this one. In fact, this week we met with some administrators from our local school about our Kids Hope mentoring program, and we were concerned. We were like, are they going to want us back? What about COVID? What about all this? And they said, we absolutely want you back. We're so eager to have you back, and they have a huge need for mentors. Big goal here, okay? Big God-sized goal here. I want us to double our number of mentors within the first month. That's going from 20 up to 40. and there's way more need even than that. We can keep building from there. But this mentorship program is so great because it actually takes 3 people to mentor a kid. It takes one person to meet with that child for 1 hour a week with one kid, and you do that consistently through the school year. We train you what to do and how to structure that hour-long time. We support you, it's great. But then that person also has to be supported by a financial partner. It's $20 a month through Kids Hope to get us all the training and the ongoing support that we need. And then also we need a prayer partner for each kid. Somebody who's going to be communicating with the person eyeball to eyeball with the kid and just going, how can I pray for you? So hey, if you got the time, or you got the money, or you just got the time to pray, or whatever it is, there's something for you with Kids Hope. And I would love for you, again, here's that contact information. Reach out to us. We want to get this thing going. And it's time for us to experience that best life that Jesus talked about. The life that he modeled for us so beautifully. We get to serve, church. Let's do this. Hey, it's been a privilege sharing this with you today. I'm going to put up some compelling scriptures. There were so many that I couldn't get to and so much to say about this. So I'm just going to have you linger with some scriptures here at the end, and that'll have the final word this week. So God bless you. Enjoy these next few moments and get out there and serve. Reach out to us. Let's do this thing.